Hello everybody, welcome to the channel. I'm Richard and this is Lap of the World. Today we're going to be changing all 10 spark plugs in our Lamborghini Gallardo. Now this car is a 2004, meaning it is a pre-LP with the 5-liter uneven firing V10. If you have a later LP Gallardo with the 5.2-liter engine, your process may look a little bit different, so bear that in mind as we get started. To change the spark plugs in your pre-LP Gallardo, you'll need the following tools and supplies. In addition to 10 of your choice of new spark plugs, more on that in a moment, you will need 17 and 13mm box wrenches, T20 and T25 Torx drivers or bits. I'd recommend a stick magnet just in case, a 3mm hex bit, a 13mm socket and 5/8 spark plug socket, a roughly 6-inch extension, an assortment of ratchet handles, and a torque wrench that goes down to 18 Nm or 13 foot-pounds. Lastly, about 3 feet of lumber or another handy prop rod. With respect to which spark plug to use or which is best, I'm not here to review spark plugs, but I will give you all of the options and you can make your own value judgment. The N-Period Workshop reference calls for a specific champion plug, but if you walk into your Lamborghini dealer today and ask for plugs, you'll be walking out with NGK-R PFR 76s for about $50 each. Price aside, those are the most correct answer with the specific pre-gap for the Gallardo of 0.8mm. That said, there are other plugs that anecdotally work fine and have the correct form factor. Those include offerings from AC Delco, Champion, Denso, NGK, and probably some other off-brand stuff that's not worth mentioning. I opted for the Denso 5311 IK24 because that's what I could get my hands on in short order. They ran me about $9 a pop. In theory, the Iridium should be superior to Platinum, but again, I'm not here to review spark plugs. I measured the gaps at about 0.9mm, which is close to the factory spec. With plugs in hand, step 1 will be to use your small Torx and hex tools to remove the plastic side panels in the engine bay. Doing so will necessitate removing the gas struts with the 13 and 17mm box wrenches, so this is where your improvised prop will come into play. You'll want to just leave the struts off, as their absence will also help with access while doing the work to come. Now that we have the plastics out of the way, it's worth noting that the Gallardo's engine isn't perfectly centered in the car. Unsee that if you can, but what it means is that the process for getting access to the coils and plugs is a little different for each side. Stay tuned for that. Starting on the easier right side of the car, the first thing we need to do is move the coolant expansion tank out of the way. No need to drain or remove, it's held in place with a single 13mm bolt to the rear and some rubber dowels on the front side. With the bolt out, just slide it slightly rearward and then outboard into the cavity under the rear fender. This will allow us easier access to the 2 forwardmost plug wells. Next, we need to remove the coil cover plates. They come off with 2 T25 Torx screws. Some trivia, these were originally a TSB in 2004 to prevent rainwater from getting into the plug wells, but they then came standard on all later cars. With the coil packs now exposed, we need to undo the wire connectors. Your goal here is to avoid breaking the clips, and here's the best way I found to avoid that. Position a wider screwdriver in the clip area and another ideally thinner screwdriver between the connector and the coil pack. Gently rotate the screwdriver near the clip until you hear a click or until you're able to slide the coil with gentle pressure on the other screwdriver. The plastic may be brittle, so if you do end up breaking one, or if they're already broken, as some of mine were, don't fret too much, as they do seem to have a pretty robust friction fit even without the clip. Next, use either your fingers or those same 2 screwdrivers to gently pry up on the coil packs from anywhere but the plug side. They should eventually pop loose and you can then remove them by hand. When the coil's out of the way, the process from here will be fairly straightforward for anyone who's changed a spark plug before. I suggest removing and replacing the plugs one at a time versus removing them all. This just minimizes the number of open holes at any given time into which something could fall and cause big problems later. Covering the bases for those uninitiated though, grab your 5/8 spark plug socket on a 6-inch extension and break the plug loose. It should come loose with not too much effort. If one feels very stuck, be sure to inspect the threads in the cylinder head after the plug is out. Once removed, I'd suggest laying the plugs out on some marked paper to keep track of the cylinders they came out of. This will let you check for any differences in wear and color and potentially get ahead of some problems. Load your new plug into the spark plug socket on the extension, gently lower it into place and thread it in by hand until snug. Then tighten it with a torque wrench to 18 Nm or about 13.5 foot-pounds. Remember, you are threading into a very expensive aluminum cylinder head here, so it's no time for a 1 grunt and a half a turn approach. Rinse and repeat for the remaining cylinders, and then it's time to move on to the left side of the car and an extra step. When you first look, it will become pretty apparent that nothing is happening with the spark plugs with this chassis member in place. Fortunately, our kind Italo-Germanic overlords have seen fit to bolt this one into place versus welding it, so it's only a matter of removing 3 bolts in the front and 2 in the rear before lifting it out of the way. allowing us access to the coil covers and everything underneath. From this point, the second verse is the same as the first, so proceed from here as you did on the right bank of cylinders. With respect to reinstalling that chassis member, there isn't a torque spec listed, but looking at other fasteners in the shop reference that do have similar specs, I went with 35 foot-pounds, again exercising some caution for bolts going into aluminum. Once you're done, don't forget to re-affix your coolant expansion tank, then it's time to fire things up and hopefully get the OK from your multifunction display. With that, congratulations on saving yourself probably $1,000 in labor and getting to know your Gallardo just a little better. Your owner's manual will recommend doing this every 15,000 miles on a pre-LP Gallardo. Given that a lot of Gallardos may not even have 15,000 miles on it, your car may appreciate a shorter mileage interval change, but use your own judgment. For our part, we're not actually changing them due to mileage anyway. However, the plugs were showing signs of degradation that may have been somewhat exacerbated by some fuel-air mixture shenanigans that we've been chasing. But more on that in future videos. In the meantime, we hope you've enjoyed this one, or at least found it informative, if not entertaining. And until next time, though, I'm Richard. This is Lap of the World. We'll see you guys all in the next video, if not the track.